Assalamualaikum and a very good day to my dear panels. Today, I, Nur Wahida binti Muhammad Said, together with my partner Nur Fatin Nabila, will be presenting on the effectiveness of open distance learning (ODL) among university students in relation with learning interactivities, motivation and digital divide in UiTM Seremban 3.
The main purpose of this chapter is to identify the factor that influence the effectiveness of open distance learning (ODL) in UiTM Seremban 3. Due to COVID-19 crisis pandemic, many global esteemed institutions has adopted online e-learning to establish the continuity of teaching and learning process. Ministry of Higher Education (MOHE) Malaysia also has ratified all tertiary institutions in conducting e-learning due to this pandemic.
Moving on to problem statement. The emerging outbreak of the COVID-19 has affected around 120 countries in the landscape of education, putting an end to any face-to-face learning of billions of students worldwide. Now, this has led most of the tertiary institutions to shift their operation through e-learning, including Malaysia, in order to contain the spread of the COVID-19 virus. Firstly, it was found that the low quality of knowledge given by the lecturers throughout ODL occur as they possess low capabilities in understanding the utilization of technology to conduct e-learning at the early stage, hence only leaving the students with notes and assignments. Other than that, it was found that the absence of student participation and interaction is still a problem during online classes. Now, this is because of the high preference to study face-to-face amongst the students has led them to feel demotivated with less interest in pursuing their studies via the internet. Lastly, it was found that the students face problems regarding the access of internet facilities, especially those living in remote and rural areas where the internet connection is poor.
Following questions are developed for better understanding on the effectiveness of open learning distance during the pandemic. First, is there any relationship between learning interactivity and the effectiveness of ODL? Second, is there any relationship between motivation and the effectiveness of ODL? Third, is there any relationship between digital divide and the effectiveness of ODL? The research objectives for the study are as follows. First, to determine the relationship between learning interactivity and the effectiveness of ODL. Second, to determine the relationship between the motivation and the effectiveness of ODL. Third, to determine the relationship between digital divide and the effectiveness of ODL. Based on literature review and understanding of three independent variables, which are learning interactivity, motivation, and digital divide, conceptual framework has been developed. The conceptual framework has proposed a direct relationship between these three independent variables and the effectiveness of ODL.
Now, we will dissect the independent variables through literature review. Firstly, there's learning interactivity. Interactivity is associated with the interaction between humans with interpersonal communication. Now, this can either be face-to-face or technologies mediated in the social action theory. From the instructional theory, interaction provides the means for students to receive feedbacks, as feedbacks determines a positive development in learning. Basically, this emphasizes on the lecturer's ability to accept and adapt new developments towards the competency-based education. Now, the teacher or lecturer plays an important role in determining the student's in-depth knowledge in character building and understanding with the pedagogy knowledge or skills that they own.
Motivation is a complex aspect of human psychology and behavior that impact on how people choose to spend their time, how much energy they spend to any particular task, how they think and feel about the task, and how long they stick with it. Motivation is the most important and basic requirement for approach learning activity as well as the engine that drives the process forward. There are external and internal factors that influence on student motivation in online learning classroom, such as self-discipline, work burden, time engagement, and environment.
Lastly, digital divide. According to OECD, the term digital divide is defined as the disparity between individuals, households, businesses, and geographic areas at different socioeconomic levels by taking into account their accessibility to ICTs and their connectivity to the internet for a wide range of activities. Internet connectivity plays an important role in bridging the gap of digital divide inside and outside classrooms, especially in higher institutions. Now, given that internet connectivity is guaranteed and that digital literacy is adequately acquired, the interaction between the education and the students can be easily attained, transcending the bounds of traditional classrooms, thus reducing the digital divide, particularly in isolated areas. Now we will look into the research methodology. For research design, quantitative method is used to obtain data from the 359 sample of students. So, the unit of analysis would be the individuals of both degree and diploma students of UiTM Seremban 3 from the faculties of FSPPP, FSR, and FSKM. Next would be the sample size. From an estimated population of 5,000 students of UiTM Seremban 3, a sample of 359 respondents from UiTM Seremban 3 of three different faculties mentioned were taken for this research. Furthermore, is the sampling technique. Stratified sampling under the simple random sampling is a technique used where a random sample is taken from each subgroup of a given population. Then, for data measurement, the measurement of Likert scale, where a scale from 1 to 5 describing from strongly disagree to strongly agree, is used in the questionnaires distributed. As for the data analysis, descriptive statistics and Pearson correlation were used to analyze the data obtained from the questionnaires. The data collected from the questionnaires include Section A, demography, Section B, learning interactivity, Section C, motivation, Section D, digital divide, and Section E, the effectiveness of ODL. Now, there are 7 questions for each of these sections mentioned by utilizing the Likert scale. Moving on to our research findings. So, it can be seen that the survey has been answered by 390 respondents. After discarding partially the completed questionnaires, a total of 359 valid respondents were returned with a total useful response rate of 92.05%. Based on the demographic table, there are slightly more female representatives by 52.9% than male, which makes up 47.1%. Next, the majority of the respondents aged from 21 to 23 makes up 76.3%, followed by respondents aged 18 to 20 by 23.4% and 24 and above only 0.3%. As for the faculties of each respondents, the majority of the respondents came from FSR, 47.1%, followed by FSPPP, 32.6%, and FSKM, 20.3%. Moreover, for current academic undertakings, majority of the respondents are degree students, 61%, and diploma students, 39%. Furthermore, for the year of study, 61.8% of respondents are final year students, while 38.2% are non-final year students. In terms of family income range, the majority of the respondents came from B40 income families, which makes up 58.8%, followed by M40 income families, 35.9%, and the least coming from T20 families, which is 5.3%. Now, in addition, for the place of residence, the majority of the respondents reside in semi-urban areas, which is 56.5%, followed by rural, 29%, and the urban, 14.5%. Next, we look into the correlation analysis results from the table given. Correlation analysis is used to describe the strength and direction between the variables. From the table given, there is a negative relationship between learning interactivities with a result of negative 0.216, motivation negative 0.359, and digital divide negative 0.237, in which these independent variables resulted towards the effectiveness of ODL. A correlation coefficient of -1 means that for every positive increase in one variable, there is a negative decrease of a fixed proportion in the other. So all of the assumptions of independent variables gathered from the literature review has been proven to negatively affect the effectiveness of ODL. Therefore, all alternate hypotheses were supported, whereby there is a relationship between the effectiveness of ODL with the learning interactivity, motivation, and digital divide.
There is a relationship between the effectiveness of ODL with the learning interactivity, motivation, and digital divide. In order to increase the effectiveness of ODL, lecturers should practice learning method provided by Ministry of Higher Education and MOHE to promote learning interactivity through variety of appropriate learning platform. Other than that, Malaysian Communication and Multimedia Commission (MCMC) must make reassessment on the criteria of internet service to be added by internet service provider in order to fulfill the needs of institution in the conduct of ODL. Educator also can create a sense of community in open learning distance environment. A student will be more motivated to engage with open distance learning for a longer amount of time.
Moving on to research limitation and future suggestions. Firstly, there's limited sample. The sample of this research involves one branch of university in Malaysia with only 3 different faculties. So, it is suggested that future research should collect data from more respondents from other faculties of other public universities in Malaysia. Now, this is of course to allow the generalization of these findings to be made. Secondly, time constraint. With the enforcement of the Movement Control Order (MCO) and the devastating situation of the current pandemic in this country, the researchers were unable to execute the study on time, which resulted in delays in completing the research surveys and collecting data from the respondents. The research should have been done for a longer period of time to gather enough responses. With enough time, the researcher can gain relevant respondents in a timely manner, and the respondents will have a better knowledge of the research goal. Thirdly is the weakness of the quantitative research itself. With quantitative research, it is possible to generalize data by evaluating the viewpoints and responses of the sample population from quantified data. However, it may result to an inaccurate depiction of the target population, obstructing the researcher's ability to meet with their objectives. As a suggestion, future research should collect data for their study using a qualitative method to be able to learn more about the subject of their research. While the survey is being conducted, the researchers can approach their target respondents and observe and capture their reaction, body language, attitude, and behavior.
By looking into learning interactivity provided by the lecturers to the student motivation in conducting ODL, and the digital divide that exists in Malaysia, it would explain why this approach is deemed to be ineffective by majority of UiTM Seremban 3 students. The findings of this research are to be used as a reference to enhance Malaysian current policy to create better online environment and to provide quality education. So we truly believe that the knowledge we gain throughout our degree program has been well devoted into this thesis, providing informative and in-depth knowledge to the readers regarding the effectiveness of open distance learning.